Good morning, everyone. My name is Angelica Sander. I'll be the first presenter of today. So let me just share my screen. All right, so I'm an attorney here at Disability Rights Texas, and I primarily handle cases that have to do or that are against post-secondary institutions. So that's what the first presentation is on. So we'll just go ahead and get started. We have a lot of information to cover. And we'll have some time for questions at the very end, but you can put them in the chat and I'll go through them at the end. I do want to remind you to please keep yourself muted just so that there is no interruptions or anything. Okay, so this presentation is mostly tailored for students that are either transitioning out of high school into either college or university, trade or vocational school, or students that are already students in a higher education institution. So I do want to highlight something very important, a big distinction from high school to college. So in high school, the burden a lot of times is on the teachers of the school to make sure all the accommodations are properly executed, making sure everything is working, all of that. In college, the responsibility is more on the student. The student has to go out and seek accommodations. And we'll go through the process of how to do that. But just know that different laws apply from high school versus college, and the student will have more responsibilities in college on regarding getting their accommodations, voicing out if there's any issues or any problems with those accommodations, or if there's any violations. So just keep that in mind. Like I said, different laws apply for post-secondary education. It's the Americans with Disabilities Act and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. And when high school is a TEA, that would no longer apply.
This is Jonathan. I'm also with Disability Rights Texas. If you want to pin the interpreter, if you go to their screen on Zoom, you put your cursor top right, there will be an option. You can click that and click.
Oh, pin video?
Yes.
Okay. Does it work now? I just did it. Can you see it, Jonathan?
I can see it, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. All right, so we'll continue on. So what you will learn today. Am I good? I think I heard something. Okay. What you'll learn today is what are your rights as a student, your responsibilities, the institution's responsibilities towards you, how to self-advocate, and some helpful resources. Okay. So what are your rights? You have the right to equal access to an education that includes financial aid, housing, student activities. Those are just examples, but it regards to all of your experience in that institution. Also, right to reasonable accommodations in and outside of the classroom, right that your accommodations will be followed by your professors, a right to file a complaint if you feel like your rights have been violated, and also that there will be no retaliation for filing that complaint. And just a side note on service animals, if you have a service animal, let the Disability Service Office know that you'll be bringing your service animal. Under the law, you can absolutely bring your service animal to school. The only two questions that you can be asked about that animal is the dog or animal a service animal required because of a disability? and what work or task has the dog been trained to perform. It's very important that in order for your animal to be considered a service animal, it is trained in some way to perform the task. So just the fact that you have your animal with you and that provides comfort, doesn't quite meet the definition of a service animal. That would be more a emotional support animal. So, and that tends to be a little bit different. And regarding your responsibilities, you have to make sure your dog is groomed and clean and always have control of it. So just make sure that is always in a leash.
We're gonna build our top. Everything is better with sauce.
And I'm
And then we top with some more cheese. So this has been cooking for about 5 minutes and it looks perfect. Now here comes
who that is.
the other half.
Okay. All right. Go back. Okay, perfect. And so how to request class and campus accommodations. The first thing to know is that all schools have a disability office that is geared, or its sole purpose is to help students with disabilities. And so in that office, that's where you can request accommodations. You can, request any help if you have any questions about accommodations, and also submit your complaints. So regarding how to actually request accommodations, you would contact them and find out what their process is. Generally, all schools have the same process. Still, it would be a good idea to contact them, but the process mostly consists of filling out a couple of forms and then submitting supporting documentation. And that a lot of times includes medical documentation. And if you're confused or not sure how to reach out to them the first time, I always suggest do it by email and state that you're a student with a disability, that you're seeking accommodations, and that you provide medical documentation supporting that disability or proof of that disability. And that should be enough. They should be able to tell you, what accommodations can be provided, and so forth. So that kind of gets us into what your responsibilities as a student are. So like I mentioned earlier, compared to when you were in high school and college, is your responsibility to get accommodations. Even if your professors know that you have a disability, if you have not requested accommodations through the proper channels, which is the disability office, they're not obligated to give you accommodations. So that's why it's super, super important to do that early enough before the semester starts or before you start school. That way the disability office can process it and make any changes if there's any accommodations that you don't think will be a good fit for you. So as regarding your responsibilities, request the accommodations in a timely manner, gather medical records, allow extra time to process due to COVID-19 related delays. If you need any additional medical exams or appointments, that is your responsibility to pay for those. I believe that is a little bit different on how it is in high school. Here, all of that is your responsibility. A really, really big responsibility is the next one, which is to present your letters to your professors on the first day of class. So once the disability office has reviewed all of your records, they will give you a letter saying, Jill will get 2.5 times on exams, and it'll list the accommodations. And that letter is the one that you need to present to your to your professor the first day of class. And the next one is just a suggestion. Just remind your professors of your accommodations. And also, you have to request the accommodation every semester. Even if nothing has changed, you still have to request it. So here is just a quick diagram of what I've just gone through. Starting here with, once you get accepted, contact the disability office, ask about the process, gather documentation, get any additional testing if necessary, ask your doctors for letters or documents that support your diagnosis of your disability, turn in the documentation, and then follow up 1 week before school starts. All right. Once you're approved, send the accommodation letter. Once the accommodation letter is approved, send it to the professors and yeah, just follow up. Regarding the school's responsibilities, your professor is responsible for honoring all of your accommodations. They cannot say like, oh, I can't do that, or I don't want to do that. If they have any issues of why they can't do it, maybe they don't know how to do a certain accommodation, they can contact the Disability Service Office, because ultimately it is the Disability Services Office responsibility to make sure that the accommodations they approved are honored. And the school also has a responsibility to pay for any expenses related to the accommodation. For example, and this excludes any medical evaluations or anything like that, but it includes mostly like if there's specific software that is necessary, or if any textbooks have to be accessible, the expenses of making textbooks accessible, that is their responsibility. And also, if for some reason there's an accommodation that that cannot be provided, they need to give you an alternative. They can't say, sorry, we can't do that, and that's it. They need to be able to provide an alternative accommodation. So what happens if professors don't follow your accommodations? Here is a list of just the hierarchy of who you should complain to. So the first one is professors. A lot of times professors will be willing to work with you and make something work. So contact them first, then the Disability Service Office, then the dean. File a grievance, a formal grievance with the school. All schools have a grievance or complaint process, and it's on their website. So you can always check that out and fill it out that way. And at any point, you can contact us, and I'm able to guide you through that process. And why would you file a complaint? Basically, if you think your rights have been violated, you can file a complaint. So next, self-advocacy tips. And these are just things that I, through having a lot of clients that have very similar issues that are in school or about to go into school. These are just some things that I've identified that would be helpful to either help them not get into a bad situation or help the student get out of that bad situation sooner rather than later. Because obviously what we don't want is for students' grades to suffer. And so these will be helpful. One is, like I mentioned earlier, remind your professors that your accommodations a few days before you need them, especially for those freshman classes where it's a lot of students. The professors they shouldn't, but they might forget that you need accommodations. And so maybe a week ahead before the exam, let them know, hey, just reminding you, I need X, Y, and Z accommodation. And that a lot of times can help the professor stay on top of it. Let your professors know that the disability office can assist them. We saw a lot of these situations when COVID happened and things went all virtual, for like professors that didn't quite know how to work Zoom or, use the technology available very much. The Disability Service Office can definitely help them fill in any gaps on how to implement the accommodations that are approved. Next would be tell your professors if you have any issues with their accommodations. Or sorry, tell the Disability Service Office. You can also tell professors, but it would be best to tell the Disability Service Office. So, if there's a certain accommodation that you think it's not working out for you currently, and you think that there may be a better accommodation that would be a better fit, you can tell the disability office at any time and ask them to amend the accommodation letter. It's better that you do this mid-semester than wait until the end of semester where your grades have already suffered in some way. So the key here is just communication. Communicate when things are not working well for you. Communicate, if you think there's something else that may be better. So yeah. And then the last thing is always communicate by email or written in some form of way. That's because if for some reason things cannot be resolved quickly, and then you have 2 or 3 semesters of bad grades because your accommodations are not working out, it's much easier for us as attorneys to be able to see the conversations that have transpired and be able to identify if there was true violation of your ADA rights, if there's evidence, if everything's done over the phone and there's no trail, like no evidence of the conversations that took place, it's a lot harder for us, and it's a lot harder for us to be able to resolve the issue with the school. So just keep that in mind. The best thing is to get everything in writing. And if you have a phone conversation, you can send an email afterwards. Say, per our conversation that we discussed as X, Y, and Z, you can just do that. All right, so next are resources. So the first one that a lot of people may not know about is the Certification of Deafness and Blindness Tuition Waiver. So if you meet certain criteria, you can apply to have your Texas school tuition waived at colleges, universities here in Texas. I put in the link, and I will be sharing this PowerPoint presentation with everybody. But you can apply for this. You must be at least 17 years old, either provide proof of being a senior in high school or having graduated from a Texas high school, and that can completely waive your tuition. So definitely something worth looking into if you think you would qualify. Next are independent living services. These services are to help people with disabilities achieve a greater independence in the home and community. There are centers located all over Texas, and I've listed here just some of the things that they can help with. So they can help with counseling, information, and referrals if you need any additional assistance, independent living skills training, and all of this, again, is with the goal to help you be independent. Advocacy, they're able to act as advocates in some situations, such as equal access. I believe a lot of them are not attorneys, but so they do similar functions like we do, and transition services, either for more like elderly people, but also help transitioning from high school to employment or school. So Very good resource there. And again, I put the link down below. Another thing is that you can get your loan discharged due to disability. So I've seen this, for people that have progressive disabilities, they'll get student loans to obviously study, and then their disability has progressed so much that they are not able to pay for their loans. So to qualify, you must complete the application and provide documents. This is also helpful for veterans. And then if you're eligible for Social Security disability, you likely can qualify for this discharge. Just know that your ability to acquire new loans in the future will be affected if you get this loans discharged through this process. This is really, for, like I said, those progressive disabilities. And there's, a question on whether you'll be able to pay it off or not. I definitely would not recommend to do this, like if you're not meet the criteria of being 100% disabled. But again, you can check it out if you think that would work for you. Second to last, is the Texas Able accounts. So these are bank accounts that can help with for you to be able to save money, large sums of money that are generally discharged for purposes of determining eligibility to receive government assistance or benefits. So you can save money in that account and it won't affect your eligibility for Social Security benefits. To be eligible for these type of bank accounts, you need to be a Texas resident, and your disability must have been developed before the age of 26. But those are the two main criteria. The website of to open one of these accounts, they have webinars pretty regularly, so I put the link to that and see if that would be, you can see if that would be a good option for you. And yeah. All right, and then the last thing, and we'll have a couple of minutes for questions, is supported decision-making agreements. These are agreements that I know schools a lot of times will recommend parents to get guardianship over their son or daughter students. And we actually don't think that guardianships are the best situations 9 times out of 10. Surely there are some times where it is necessary, but 9 times out of 10, we think that people can have a good system with supported decision-making agreements. So this agreement between the student with a disability and either a parent or someone else they trust help the person with the disability keep all of their rights, but the person supporting them can help them make decisions. So you're more of a counselor that has authorization to that student's confidential information. So for example, once the student turns 18, high schools are not able to share information with that parent unless there's some type of agreement like this signed. And so that way now the school can include the parent again in the conversation. But it's a really good document to have. It can not only be used in a school situation, but it can also be used in hospitals like medical or insurance. So this document really helps the parent that is supporting the student help the student make decisions. And also, once the student makes the decision, the parent can communicate that to either the doctor or the school and whatnot. But the student is still maintaining the rights. All right, so we are done with the presentation. I will go over to the chat and see. Okay. And I do see Cicely's comment on here. If anybody this morning needs an appointment with an attorney for a supported decision-making agreement that has not had an appointment yet, you can email her, and I'll read off her email is creid@drtx.org. Sorry. And yes, you can contact her if you want to support a decision-making agreement. Likewise, if someone needs an appointment regarding Social Security benefits, you can email Jonathan. That is JDELAROSA@drtx.org. All right. Okay, the first question I see is, do college applications have an area to note that you have a disability, or do you routinely have to request the additional form? So actually, schools cannot ask anything regarding disability in their applications. And they cannot ask you before you're admitted if you have a disability. So when you apply to college or university, any type of school, you don't have to disclose that you have a disability at all. It's after you have been accepted that you can let them know that you have a disability because you want to request accommodations. The only caveat or the only exception is if you need an accommodation to fill out the application. Then, of course, they can provide a more accessible application for you. But if you don't need an accessible application, you do not have to disclose that you have a disability, and they cannot ask you. What type of proof of disability is adequate? So honestly, it can be a lot of things. For example, just having a diagnosis letter from your doctor saying, Lisa is being treated at my office for anxiety. That is sufficient. Or you can also provide a neuropsychological evaluation. That's a pretty big and expensive evaluation. You can provide that, but even a simple letter from a doctor is sufficient. Does the SAT have to follow accommodations? Yes, they do. They absolutely do. So you would go to their website. On their search bar, you can search disability accommodation, and that should bring you to the process of how to request accommodation. And the process is very similar. You say that you're a student or a test taker with a disability, that you have X, Y, or Z disability, and you provide proof. And that should be enough to get you accommodations that you need. Does a letter from an LPC count for proof of disability? It can. It just depends. I do want to make sure to note that the disability that you're requesting accommodations for is the one you're getting proof of for. So for example, and also that medical professional is qualified to provide proof of that disability. So if, say, you have a digestive disability, but you're talking to your mental health provider and the mental health provider provides a letter saying, Lisa has a digestive disability, that provider is really not qualified to make that determination. So you may get some, I don't know, just they may not accept that. So just make sure that it's the correct doctor providing the support. But if it's, like a counselor letting the school know that you're being treated for anxiety or depression or something like that, they can do that. And it's now 10. Let me look at the agenda. All right. So Edwin, are you on? I think you are. Oh, I see you. There you go.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me? Okay. I'm hoping that everyone can hear me okay. Well, good morning. First of all, thank you all for being with us this morning. My name is Erin Castillo. I am a client assistance program advocate with Disability Rights Texas. I am a Hispanic male with black hair. I wear glasses and I have a black beard. And I identify with the pronouns he, him, and his. My job this morning is to give you a better understanding of the vocational rehabilitation system in the state of Texas, and also to give you a better understanding of the client assistance program offered at Disability Rights Texas. So what I'm gonna do initially, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen with y'all. Okay, so once again, my name is Erin Castillo. I am a CAP or Client Assistance Program Advocate with Disability Rights Texas. Initially, I would like to give you guys a better understanding of what Disability Rights Texas is. So Disability Rights Texas is the protection and advocacy agency in the state of Texas. We came, our origins go back to the 1970s. And this was due to an investigation that was conducted in the state of New York, in which a reporter, Gerardo Rivera, actually went to a facility where children with disabilities lived. They did an investigation and found out that those children were being mistreated at that facility. So the United States decided that it would be a good idea to create protection and advocacy agencies throughout the nation. One of the things that I must emphasize is that there is a protection and advocacy agency in all of the states in the United States. So our goal is essentially to protect the rights of not only children, but also adults with disabilities in the state of Texas. Our goal is to make sure that people with disabilities are respected and that they're given the dignity that they deserve in the places where they live, where they work, and where they go to school. Also, we make sure, or we try to ensure that the rights of people with disabilities are not being violated, and that various entities that they follow the law the way that it was intended to be. Next, just to give you once again, my goal this morning is not to give you a, I guess you might say, a thorough understanding of our agency, but rather to give you a better understanding of vocational rehabilitation services and the client assistance program. However, I just wanted to point out how our agency is structured. We have various teams that handle various issues related to people with disabilities. For instance, we have the client assistance program, which I'm going to be discussing here in a few. And with that program, our goal is to work with clients that are interested in vocational rehabilitation services and independent living services in the state of Texas. We also have a protection and advocacy for beneficiaries of Social Security, or PAPS team. One of my coworkers, Jonathan De La Rosa, will be discussing information about the PAPS team here in a few. We also have an education team that handles education-related issues with the local school districts and making sure that the rights of students are not being violated, the rights of students with disabilities are not being violated. So we have an education team that handles those type of issues. We have an employment, accessibility, and voting team that handles issues related to employment, accessibility for people with disabilities in various arenas, and also making sure that the voting rights of people with disabilities are being protected. We also have a housing, transportation, and disaster team that handles those type of issues for people with disabilities in our communities. We have a community integration team, and their goal is to facilitate the transitioning of individuals that may live in facilities such as nursing facilities, try to help them integrate it back into the communities where they live. So, we have a team that handles those type of issues. We have an institutional rights and civil liberties team, or IRCL. And what they do is they monitor a lot of institutions that provide services to people with disabilities. Also, many institutions that house people with disabilities, such as state hospitals, state prisons. So we have a team that specifically handles those type of things. We have a representative payee program, and we have a team that specifically handles those type of issues. For instance, someone that might have concerns about the representative payee, if they're a recipient of Social Security benefits, we have a program that specifically handles that. And then we have our intake team. The intake team, they're the ones that make the initial contact, the initial contact with potential clients that may get in contact with us wanting to access our services. So next, we have the Client Assistance Program, or CAP. Once again, I am a member of the Client Assistance Program, or CAP, at Disability Rights Texas. Now, the goals of CAP, our goal is to help people with disabilities who are receiving or seeking to receive services from vocational rehabilitation services in the state of Texas, which are currently managed by Texas Workforce Solutions, Vocational Rehabilitation Services. So our goal is to make sure that people who are wanting to access those services, that they're able to access those services. Also, our mandate is to help individuals that may be interested in seeking independent living services in the state of Texas. And those are provided through local independent living centers or independent living programs in the state of Texas. So next, I'm going to give you a better understanding of the vocational rehabilitation system in the state of Texas. What is it that it is supposed to do? So the vocational rehabilitation system in the state of Texas is supposed to help people with disabilities prepare for, find, and keep employment. They're supposed to provide individualized services to clients, and that's one of the things that we'll be discussing here shortly. But individualized services, meaning that someone with a disability or someone that has disabilities, that they might require services that are tailored to their needs. Okay. Some of those services could be in the form of counseling services. It could be training services that they might provide. It may be assistance with the purchasing of assistive devices. So once again, those services are tailored to the individual needs of the person that is applying for those services or seeking those services. Also, one of the mandates of vocational rehabilitation is to provide assistance to help students with disabilities plan for their transition from school to work, which we're going to discuss here in a few. So that's one of the mandates of the program. Also, on this slide, I have provided the If you wanted to get in contact with vocational rehabilitation in the state of Texas, how you could start that process through CAP. One of the things that I need to highlight is the fact that we can facilitate that process. If anyone wanted to access vocational rehabilitation services, CAP can actually facilitate that process, meaning that we can refer people to vocational rehabilitation in the state of Texas. But if you wanted to get in contact with them on your own, there are various ways in which you can do this. They have a 512 number that you can call if you wanted to get in contact with them to start that process. They also have an email address that you can use to send an email to the program, just letting them know that you're interested in services and that you're seeking to get connected with a vocational rehabilitation office that is located possibly closest to you. And then also at the bottom there, the website for vocational rehabilitation services, which will take you to a directory in which you can enter information about your location. For instance, you might be able to provide your zip code, and then this directory automatically will refer you to the office that is located closest to you. So next, we're going to discuss pre-employment transition services for students with disabilities. So once again, one of the mandates of vocational rehabilitation is to provide transition services to students with disabilities, which that can be in the form of pre-employment transition services or pre-ETS services. Vocational rehabilitation is supposed to work in conjunction with local school districts to accomplish this, meaning that they're supposed to be collaborating. One of the things that I need to point out, and the reason why they're supposed to collaborate is because some of the services that may be provided through the school district are services that may not be provided by vocational rehabilitation, and vice versa. Some of the services that a student might be able to access through vocational rehabilitation may not be provided by the local school districts. So they're supposed to be collaborating to make sure that transition services are provided to the best possible way to students with disabilities. These services are supposed to be provided for eligible transition students, which we're going to discuss eligibility here in a few, but also to potentially eligible students. Basically what that means is that for those students to receive services, vocational rehabilitation, they don't need to have necessarily all the required documentation to make someone eligible for services. Potentially eligible students could benefit from pre-employment transition services, but they don't have the program, or VR, vocational rehabilitation, is not required to request all the documentation that they might need to make someone officially eligible for the program. And we'll discuss eligibility here in a few. Also, students with disabilities that may be in need of these services. So that's what pre-employment transition services is supposed to address. In Texas, the definition of someone with a disability is a student from the ages of 14 to 22. So that is the range of how they define a student that has a disability. Someone between the ages of 14 and 22, and that's based on policies from vocational rehabilitation. The student is currently enrolled in school, and the student is receiving or has received services through special education programs, or is considered eligible for Section 504 services. So those are the things that vocational rehabilitation has to take into account when it comes to transition students with disabilities that are seeking services through them. Also, one of the things that I need to point out is that vocational rehabilitation is supposed to set aside about 15% of their budget for these type of services, for transition services and pre-employment services. So 15% of their total budget is supposed to be set aside to provide these services to students in our state. Some of the services that could be provided through transition services are job exploration counseling, assisting the student with looking at potential employment goals, vocational goals that they might be interested while they are still attending secondary education. They're supposed to look at work-based learning experiences, so meaning on-the-job type of trainings, to help these students develop skills at the workplace that might assist them with finding employment in the future. They're supposed to be looking at counseling for opportunities for enrollment in transition or post-secondary educational programs. For higher education, meaning that they're supposed to be providing counseling services that are geared towards the next step, that someone might want to take as far as post-secondary education, if someone might be interested in attending college, a community college, a four-year institution, those type of things. And then they're supposed to be providing workplace readiness training and self-advocacy. So providing training that is going to assist someone with finding employment, meaning assisting someone with job interviewing skills training, assisting someone with developing a resume, and self-advocacy services, meaning that they're supposed to be teaching transition students how to become better self-advocates. So next, the eligibility criteria for vocational rehabilitation. So how is it that they make someone eligible for services? Well, the individual has to have a physical or mental disability or impairment that substantially has an impediment to employment or substantially provides an impediment to employment. The student or the individual require services or need services to help them prepare for, secure, retain, regain, or even advance in employment. So someone that requires the services to help them prepare for, secure, retain, regain, or advance in employment, that's part of the eligibility criteria for vocational rehabilitation services. The program also has to identify that the individual can benefit from services, meaning that if VR didn't provide the services, then there would be a high chance or probability that the individual would not be able to reach their employment goal. And then also, as far as eligibility criteria, individuals that receive Social Security benefits, whether it may be SSDI or SSI benefits, they're presumed to be eligible for services, meaning that the program can automatically decide that they're eligible for services because they have been determined to have a substantial impediment to employment, and that decision has been made by the Social Security Administration. And then also one of the things that I need to emphasize is that VR services are not considered an entitlement program, meaning that not everyone will qualify or not everyone will be eligible for services. So you have to go through the process of becoming eligible. So vocational rehabilitation is not an entitlement program. So next, so when VR is making, so when they're looking at someone's eligibility for services, some of the things that they're not supposed to consider are the following: the source of the referral. So how is it that this individual was referred to us? Which entity referred this individual to us? So they're not supposed to be looking at those type of things. They're not supposed to be looking at the service or the services that someone might need. They're not supposed to look at the anticipated cost of services, meaning that they don't have a cap as far as the amount that they're able to spend on behalf of a client when it comes to the services that they require. So they're not supposed to look at the anticipated cost of those services. They're not supposed to look at the income level, which includes the family income level when it comes to the provision of certain services. One of the things that I do need to point out is that there are some services in which the client will be required to participate in the cost of the services, but all of that is determined based on the income level. There are quite a few services that they provide that, regardless of the income level of the applicant, that those services can be provided to them. But there might be some services in which the client might be required to participate in the cost of those services. They're not supposed to look at the type of disability or disabilities that the client has. They're not supposed to look at their age. They're not supposed to look at their race, gender, or national origin. They're not supposed to look at someone's education level, meaning that, as I may have mentioned before, one of the goals of the program is to help their clients advance in employment, meaning that if a client requires assistance, let's say if I currently have a bachelor's degree, and in order for me to advance in employment, I need to complete a master's degree, then the agency has the ability to do that for that client. So they're not supposed to say, just because you have a bachelor's degree, then you should be able to find employment, since you already have this training that in theory should make you employable. I mean, they're not supposed to be looking at those type of things. Also, they're not supposed to be looking at someone's previous employment history. So once again, these are the things that vocational rehabilitation is not supposed to be looking at when they're determining someone eligible for services. Okay, so eligibility and assessment. So what is it? What information do they review to make their eligibility decision? Well, vocational rehabilitation looks at current medical records that may be provided by the client. One of the things that I guess that I would encourage, if you're interested in accessing these services, is when the applicant, when the client meets with the vocational rehabilitation counselor, that they're able to bring with them any medical records that they might have that are related to their disability or disabilities. So that helps expedite that process. Okay, so if you're able to provide that information at front, that would be my recommendation. Also, vocational rehabilitation, they look at the education records that someone has. They request those records through local school districts, so they're supposed to review that information specifically when it comes to providing services to transition students. They're supposed to request that information. They're also supposed to review information from the applicant and his or her family. So they most definitely should take into account the client's view or perception of their disability, the client's view or perception about their strengths, their interests, also the client's perception of what their, I guess you might say, where their weak points might be. So they're supposed to be taking that into account. They're also supposed to be taking into account any feedback from family members, parents, legal guardians, those individuals that are with that applicant, 24/7. They're supposed to be taking into account that information that is provided by parents, legal guardians, and family members. They're also supposed to look at determination made by other government agencies. So for example, the Social Security Administration, if once again, if a client has been determined eligible for SSI or SSDI benefits, vocational rehabilitation presumes that those individuals are eligible for vocational rehabilitation services. So they're supposed to look at if you have copies of award letters, the award letter that you may have received from the Social Security Administration that provide details about the benefits that the client or that the applicant has, make sure that that information is provided to vocational rehabilitation. And then BR, the counselor, the vocational rehabilitation counselor, they themselves, they're supposed to be making observations, of how they view some of the strengths, how they view some of the weak points or impediments that the client might have in regard to their disability or disabilities. So observations by the VR counselor are also very important. And then also they're supposed to, if the vocational rehabilitation counselor doesn't have access to any existing information related to the disability or disabilities that a client might have, the program has the ability to schedule assessments on behalf of that client. And that could be because the client doesn't have any medical records at the time of the application for services. It could be that those records are outdated. So maybe the client has had records going back 10, 20 years ago, but they don't have any recent records that give them information about the client's disability or disabilities. So the program has the ability to purchase assessments to determine if someone is eligible for vocational rehabilitation services. So next, once an individual is determined eligible for vocational rehabilitation services, the client and the vocational rehabilitation counselor are supposed to be working on what they call the Individualized Plan for Employment, or IPE. The Individualized Plan for Employment, or IPE, I guess the best way to describe it is essentially the plan of services that vocational rehabilitation is going to use to help the client reach their vocational or employment goal. Now, the Individualized Plan for Employment, or IPE, is supposed to outline the vocational goal or employment goal that the client has in mind. In cases where someone might be thinking of different goals, you might have someone that they might have in mind, I don't know, 3 different things that they would like to accomplish. The program is going to ask the client to try to pinpoint the goal that they feel is the one that they're the most interested in. So, and the reason for that is because on the Individualized Plan for Employment, or IPE, they can only list one employment goal. Okay, it doesn't mean that they are not able to help the client pursue other goals, but when the Individualized Plan for Employment is created, the agency is only able to outline one main vocational employment goal. The IPE is also supposed to list the responsibilities of the client. So what is it that they're responsible for throughout this process? Meaning, are they supposed to make sure that they address their disabilities by going to doctor's appointments, taking their medications like they're supposed to? Is the client supposed to get in contact with a vocational rehabilitation counselor, once a month, once every 60 days, once every 90 days? So it's supposed to list the responsibilities of the client. Also, it's supposed to list the responsibilities of the agency. So how is it that vocational rehabilitation is supposed to facilitate the client reaching their employment goal? So it's also supposed to list the responsibilities of the agency. The IP is also supposed to outline the services that will be provided by the agency. For example, if the agency is going to be providing assistance with counseling services for that client, if they're providing some type of training sponsorship for that client, that's supposed to be listed on the IPE. If they're providing any type of assistive devices, or if the agency is purchasing assistive technology on behalf of the client, that information is supposed to be listed on the IPE. It's also supposed to outline how the progress is going to be assessed in the case, meaning how is it that the client is getting closer to reaching their goal, to reaching their employment or vocational goal. So that information is supposed to be in the IPE. It also provides timelines for completions. For example, when a service is supposed to begin, when a service is supposed to end. Now, one of the things that I need to point out is that even if the IP has those timeframes in which a service is supposed to begin and when a service is supposed to end, the IPE is a document that can always be amended. It can always be changed. So for example, you might have a client that they have an employment goal today that changes, in a couple of months. The agency, they have the ability to change the employment goal, and they also have the ability to change the services that are being provided to that client. And then last but not least, the IP, it has to be signed by both the client and the counselor. So they both have to be in agreement that this will be the plan of services that will be used to help the client reach the employment goal or the vocational goal. Next, one of the things that vocational rehabilitation is supposed to, that they're supposed to inform their clients is that there are advocacy groups such as Disability Rights Texas and other advocacy groups in the community that can help facilitate developing or creating the IPE for a client. So they're supposed to notify the client that advocacy groups can provide assistance in that regard, meaning that you might have clients that they're not certain about the employment goal that they should pursue. They're not certain about the services that they might need or they would like to request. So there are advocacy groups such as Disability Rights Texas and other advocacy groups out in the community that can help the client, that they can help facilitate this process. Next, one of the goals of vocational rehabilitation, when they're creating the individualized plan for employment or IPE, one of the emphasis should be the maximization of the employment goal, meaning that they're looking at the client's strengths or their unique strengths, the resources available to the client, the priorities that the client has, meaning what type of employment they're interested in pursuing, what areas of interest they have. They're supposed to look at the client's concerns. If the client is not completely certain about an employment goal or the services that the agency is providing or that they're planning to provide, they're supposed to be looking at those type of things. They're looking at the client's abilities. They're looking at the client's capabilities. And then, one of the things that I need to point out is that one of the goals of the program is to help clients get into some type of career path or an employment goal that is going to help them reach an income level that they can use to be able to survive. Unfortunately, in the past and in many senses up to this point, people with disabilities, especially people with the most significant disabilities, historically, they have been placed in what you might call entry-level jobs. Some might refer to those jobs as dead-end jobs that unfortunately do not give people with disabilities the ability to be able to earn enough money to be able to survive. So the program is supposed to be looking at how they can maximize the employment goal that the applicant has in mind, and even for those individuals that might have the most significant disabilities. And then, making sure that individual with disabilities are able to participate in job-driven training. That's one of the that's part of the maximization of the employment goal, that they're able to pursue high-quality employment outcomes, receive services to advance in employment, such as additional training that may be required for someone to advance in their careers. And that includes even providing services to someone that might need a graduate level education. Next, I'm going to talk briefly about certain services that VR can provide, and I must point out that some of the services that I'm going to highlight, there are services that VR has the potential to offer a number of services that unfortunately not all the services are listed in this PowerPoint presentation. So I'm just going to go through these services just to give you some examples of some of the services that they're able to provide. So for example, they can provide assessments to someone that may be interested in accessing services with them. It could be for eligibility purposes. It could be for purposes of determining if an employment goal is appropriate for someone. So the agency has the ability to do those type of things. They can provide counseling and guidance to help someone, to guide them towards an employment goal that is going to be a good fit for that individual. They can provide job placement services, which it can be in the form of job placement services. It can be supported employment services, and even customized employment, which we're going to discuss supported employment and customized employment here in a few. They can also provide interpretive services, readers. So the agency has the ability to provide those services to individuals that might require those services. And they even have the ability to provide personal assistance services to someone that may require those services while they're participating in the program. Next, some additional services that the agency can provide. It could be training services to someone, which could be in the form of academic training, vocational training. It could be training through a community college. So they have the ability to do that. They also have the ability to purchase tools, materials, textbooks for a client. They can provide tuition assistance for post-secondary education. Now, one of the things that they're required to do, vocational rehabilitation, is they're supposed to inform the client that they also have to explore other sources to pay for their tuition, meaning financial aid, for example, scholarships, grants that the client, that they're not required to pay back. So the agency is supposed to inform clients of that. So, and that's part of the exploration of comparable benefits that they're required to do. So the agency, they are supposed to maximize their effort to secure grant assistance from other sources. They can purchase occupational licenses, tools, equipment, supplies, supplies, especially for someone that may be interested in becoming self-employed or someone that has a self-employment goal in mind. They might be able to purchase supplies for someone that has that goal. They can also provide physical and mental restoration services, which could be in the form of corrective surgery, therapeutic treatment. It could be diagnosis and treatment for mental or emotional disorders. And they can also provide diagnosis and treatment to reduce or eliminate impediments that a client might have while they are working. And then, comparable benefits, when comparable benefits are not available, they might be able to provide these services. In addition to that, they have other services such as transportation services, which, that can be a support service that can be provided to clients that may need those services to participate in other vocational rehabilitation services. Rehabilitation technology, the agency has the ability to purchase those type of things, assistive technology devices. They even have the ability to provide vehicle modifications for a client that may require that for the purpose of reaching their employment goal. And they can even provide maintenance while participating in vocational rehabilitation, which could be in the form of food or clothing in excess of everyday living expenses, meaning that there might be some clients that may require the services. For example, if they needed those supports while they're participating in training, the agency may be able to provide that in excess of everyday living expenses. Next, so I just want to discuss supported employment services, which is a form of job placement services, just briefly with y'all. Supported employment services is a very specialized type of job placement assistance that vocational rehabilitation provides. This type of job placement assistance is supposed to provide individualized services, especially to those clients that may have those most significant disabilities. These services are more ongoing, I guess you might say. They are hands-on services, which are usually provided by a job coach or an employment specialist. And also, these services, one of their goals is to help establish extended services that the client might need after supported employment services are provided to them. So once they stop receiving, let's say, job coaching or job skills training from a job coach or employment specialist, supported employment services is supposed to outline ongoing services long-term for these clients. VR Services also has the ability to provide customized employment, which in the past, some of you may have heard the term job carving. So that's what customized employment is, which is essentially making sure that a client, once again, that might have a most significant disability or that might have most significant disabilities, that they're able to help that client have a good match as far as employment with a potential employer. In that process, vocational rehabilitation is also supposed to explore the needs of the employer. Not only explore the needs of the client, but also explore the needs of the employer to make sure that this customized employment or this job carving process, that it is a good match for both individuals, for both the employer and the client. Okay, with vocational rehabilitation, every client will reach a point in which the case is going to be closed. For a case to be closed successfully through vocational rehabilitation, the client has to reach at least 90 days of employment. That employment has to be stable, and the individual no longer needs services from vocational rehabilitation. Both the individual and the counselor, they have to be in agreement that the case is going to be closed and that the client is doing well on the job. And then also the agency or vocational rehabilitation is supposed to inform the client that they could also access post-employment services if the client were to need services after the case is closed. So, for example, an example of post-employment services might be that a client, let's say that if they have a job currently and let's say 6 months down the line, they are told by their employer that they want to see if they can promote them to a new position within the company, and that new position requires a new set of skills. So the client may need assistance with job skills training. So if that is the case, those services could be provided through post-employment services by vocational rehabilitation. Okay, and we're reaching almost the end of my presentation. So I just wanted to point out some of the things that we do through CAP, my program with Disability Rights Texas. So through CAP services, we help individuals apply for vocational rehabilitation services, and individuals that are experiencing difficulty applying for services. So, we help facilitate that process. We resolve disputes or disagreements between clients and the vocational rehabilitation program in the state of Texas, clients that are currently receiving services. We also assist clients in understanding how the VR program works. We help clients understand how policy works, how policy, what is the intention of the policy. So, we help clients understand those type of things. We also help develop strategies to improve the situation that the client might have with VR. If there may be an issue regarding communication between the client and the vocational rehabilitation counselor, we attempt to resolve those issues. And we're required to resolve those issues at the lowest level, meaning that initially we're going to attempt to resolve those issues directly with a vocational rehabilitation counselor. If that doesn't work, then we move up. We move up the chain of command, meaning that we could get in contact with the vocational rehabilitation supervisor and the individual above the supervisor, which would be the vocational rehabilitation manager, and so forth. And then we also help address situations at a systemic level, meaning that we might work with a number of clients that are experiencing a similar issue. So we address those to vocational rehabilitation at a management level. And then lastly, how to get in contact with us, how to get in contact with CAP. We have a 1-800 number that individuals can call Monday through Friday from 9 to 4. So anyone can get in contact with us to complete an intake if they're interested in receiving CAP services. You can also access our information through our Disability Rights Texas website and select Getting Help. And then at the bottom of this slide, we have some links to Vocational Rehabilitation Services Manual and the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, WIOA, which is the law or the guidelines that vocational rehabilitation services, as far as the law, that they're supposed to be following in the state of Texas. Okay. So, and then also, one of the things that I just want to point out is that it is my understanding that all of you will get access to this PowerPoint. So if the information that I have given, if it was somewhat fast, we will make sure that all of you have access to this PowerPoint presentation. So I'm gonna end my presentation here.
Thank you, Edwin. And feel free to ask any questions on the chat if you have any questions for Edwin. Edwin, I wanted to ask you, since we have just a few minutes before Jonathan's presentation, can you explain, for example, for the students that are still in high school, when can they begin to request services from the VR?
Yes, I mean, they can start the process as early as 14 years of age. So there is no, I guess there is no right. Even if you have a student that that they might be their senior year, for example, they can start the process and request those services through VR. So so as far as VR is concerned, they consider someone to be a transition student, or a transition case, anyone that falls under the ages of 14 and 22. So Yeah, I mean, if anyone, if a student is interested in accessing those services, it can be done as early as 14 years of age.
All right, and we do have another question. Is there a waiting list to get services?
No. Well, at least, clients shouldn't be told, they shouldn't be told that by VR. Okay, so there is no waiting list to receive services. If that's what you're hearing from the vocational rehabilitation counselor, then that's what we're here for, to address those type of issues.
All right, and let's see, I don't see any other questions. Feel free to unmute yourself if you have any questions. Let's see, in the state of Texas, the legal age to work is 16. What services can be provided to a 14-year-old?
Well, in actuality, I think that the age that someone can work is 14. Is not supposed to interfere with their responsibilities as far as school is concerned. But someone that is 14 years old, they can receive services through VR in the form of career exploration. I guess the earlier that you can do this, the better. I don't have this information in front of me, but there are a number of studies that point out to the I guess to the idea that the earlier that students with disabilities that they can be involved in transition services, the better the chances that they can have better opportunities in the future, career wise, employment wise, income level wise. So anyone, if you're interested in accessing transition services, if it may be, you as a student, you yourself, or if it may be a parent that wants to access those services on behalf of their child, the sooner the better.
I don't see any other questions. Again, feel free to unmute yourself if you have any questions. But if not, I'll just give it a second.
Yeah, like I said, if anyone has any, I'm sorry, I think I have someone.
Go ahead.
Yes. Would the VR services be considered more effective than real life services? Or
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I didn't hear.
yeah, hold on, they're asking for questions.
No, you don't have to give me questions. No.
Okay.
Did you ask a question?
I was about to.
No,
Yeah, you can repeat the question.
you don't have to.
Okay.
What was your question?
I think from what I heard, he was asking.
Yeah, means vocational behaviorals.
Can you repeat the question from the beginning? Sorry, I think it broke up a little bit.
Yes.
Mm.
You could also type it in the chat, or also.
No question.
I think I just saw one in the chat. Angie's.
Oh yes. So
Mhm.
a 14-year-old can be referred to VR services.
Yes, the answer is yes.
And I know, some students in high school have to go to ARD meetings. Can the counselors, if the student is getting services or has applied for services before graduating high school, can the VR counselor, go to the ARD meetings?
Yes, they most definitely can, and that is actually, and that would be, my recommendation. If you are a student and you're receiving transition services through vocational rehabilitation, every time that you have an ART schedule, I would invite your vocational rehabilitation counselor, the transitional vocational rehabilitation counselor. So the more that the counselor is involved in that process, the better that they can determine what the needs might be for the student, as far as transition services that they might need to help them transition from high school to the next step, whatever that next step might be. If it may be post-secondary education, if it may be that the student might be interested in pursuing employment upon their completion of high school. So yeah, so most definitely they can participate in ART meetings.
Okay, all right. Anybody else have any questions? I'll just give it a second in case anybody's typing.
Sure. And then I just wanted to point out, if anyone has any questions that they might want to ask, I guess on an individual basis, that you're more than welcome. I may have put in the chat my email address before I started my presentation, but yeah, but most definitely, if you have an individual question that you would like to ask, feel free to reach out to me. So.
All right. Okay, well, I guess we can start with Jonathan if nobody else has any questions.
Hello, everybody. My name is, wait, sorry, did somebody have a question?
Oh, no, that was me. I just said hello.
Oh, okay, cool. Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan De La Rosa. I am a PABS advocate with Disability Rights Texas. I have a mustache. I'm mixed race, so I'm a little lighter on the brown side. Have a mustache. I'm wearing a blue plaid shirt with various shades of blue on it. My hair is a little long. I need a haircut, which I'll be addressing next week. And I've got a little 5 o'clock shadow going on. So anyway, I'm going to give a presentation. This one will be fairly short. Let me go ahead and get my screen shared here. There we go. Okay, PABS and Disability Rights Texas, understanding the protection and advocacy for beneficiaries of Social Security Program, PABS for short. I'm going to skip the first few slides because Angelica and Edwin already addressed it. It's just talking about our agency and what a P&A does. So I'm skipping to slide 5. So PABS stands for Protection and Advocacy for Beneficiaries of Social Security. And we receive our funding from Social Security to assist people who are on SSI or SSDI with barriers to employment. We help beneficiaries with disabilities obtain the services they need to secure, gain, or return to gainful employment. So some of the things we do are we help people obtain, retain, and maintain employment. We help people get promoted. We can help, we can help provide other resources to help people get promoted on the job. We can help people access vocational rehab services like CAP can do. We can also help people access the services of an employment network or other employment provider. We help improve employability, challenge discrimination, and receive information. We help clients receive information and gain knowledge about their employment rights. So in order to receive our services, you have to be receiving SSI or SSDI benefits due to disability. You have to currently be receiving them. If you received them in the past, but you don't anymore, like you've been terminated from your benefits, you are not eligible. You have to be looking for employment or trying to get self-employed. So for example, if you're receiving SSI, but you're over 65 and you're receiving it because of your age, you would not be considered PABS eligible. If you've had a loved one pass away, but you're getting benefits as a widow, not as a person with a disability, you would not be PABS eligible either. However, if you are currently receiving SSI, but you're just not receiving any income because you're earning more than what SSI can give you, then you can still be considered PABS eligible as long as they haven't terminated you. And there are other couple categories that would make you eligible as well. But no matter what, you still have to be receiving SSI or SSDI. So some of the things we can help you with. We can help provide a basic overview of SSI/SSDI programs and related health benefits. It can be a little overwhelming to hear. So part of what I do is I help discuss it individually with the client, and I help sort of figure out what works best for them in regards to explaining how these benefits work, simply because it can be overwhelming. Can provide basic information how work can impact benefits. If you receive SSI and SSDI, yes, you can work. If you'd like to work, you can work. And you can keep your benefits as long as you understand how work impacts these benefits. Another thing that we can help with is we can help people understand some of the incentives that Social Security provides so that you can keep your benefits. And we can also provide other information on different services that can assist you as somebody who receives SSI/SSDI. And we can also assist with addressing barriers to employment, which I will get into momentarily. So a common question we have is if we address overpayments. So an overpayment is somebody who has gotten a letter from Social Security saying that they owe however much money. Sometimes it's a few hundred, sometimes it's a few thousand. In regards to whether we can help with that, the answer is maybe. There has to be a barrier to employment with that overpayment right now. So let's say that because you have an overpayment, you're going to be evicted from your home because Social Security is collecting too much money to where you are unable to make ends meet. That would be something we could assist with. Because if you lose your place where you live, then that endangers your ability to keep your job. If you've worked in the past and you're receiving an overpayment right now, but you aren't interested in working, that we are unable to assist with. You have to be looking for work. And looking for work could be planning on going to college so that I can get employed later. That's considered looking for work. It could be I'm already put in applications, I'm trying to look for work there, or I'm just wanting to find out what will happen to my benefits. That we can assist with. But in regards to overpayments, that overpayment has to be causing a barrier right now. Some other things we do. So we can help work with vocational rehab, as CAP can do. And we can also explain some of the things with the vocational rehab and employment network, which is sort of the flip side of vocational rehab services. We can discuss the benefits and detriments to either, depending on what your interests are. We can also assist in addressing vocational rehab/employment network decisions. We can also assist with transition services. So let's say that somebody is transitioning from school to entering the workforce. We can assist in developing a transition plan and appropriate transitional services, along with informing people what their rights are as they enter the workforce, along with understanding how work will impact benefits. There are incentives you get as somebody who's in school as opposed to somebody who's in the workforce. So we explain some of those to you. We assist with post-secondary education issues. Talked a lot about some of the things that we do. So we can help with post-secondary coursework being accessible. We can assist with reasonable accommodations, reduced course loads, single room dorms, extended times on tests, and so on and so forth. We can help provide resources for receiving tuition waivers. For example, people who are deaf may be eligible for a deaf waiver to help them pay for school in the state of Texas. And we can also assist with student loan defaults, or we can help provide information, again, as Angie mentioned, about total permanent disability discharge, which, of course, comes with conditions. But we can assist with that so that if you wanted to return to school later on, you may be able to receive assistance after you've met those conditions, or if there are any other programs, or even just helping pay off some of your loan. I mean, we can't help you pay the loan itself. We may be able to find resources for you to help pay off a loan if it's in default. One of the bigger things we do is we advocate for competitive integrated employment. So as opposed to somebody who is working in a place that's specifically for people with disabilities, we try to help people find a job within a regular, within the workforce. And we try to make sure that these people are supported in their employment goals and that they are in the integrated and competitive employment settings of their choice. If they are working in a sheltered workshop, we make sure that they receive the wages and services that they are entitled to. And we also assist with ensuring appropriate wage determinations under the Fair Labor Standards Act and 14C certificates. We assist with employment rights. So let's say you are interested in entering the workforce, and this will be your first time entering the workforce. You are interested in receiving reasonable accommodations. You want to make sure that you're able to do the job that you've been hired to do and get said accommodations. We can assist with that. We can help you draft an accommodations letter, help you understand the process so that you can get the accommodations that will help you do the essential functions of the job that you want to do. We can also assist with expungement of arrest records that may be creating a barrier to employment. We can help file EEOC complaint and challenge discrimination in employment practices. So let's say you did work and you were terminated because of some reason related to your disability. Say, for example, you're not able to wear heels at work, but you were terminated because they would not allow for that accommodation. You can't wear heels because you had a hip replacement or something like that. We can help file a lawsuit, or not a lawsuit, but a complaint with the EEOC to help address that. So we can also assist with Medicaid and Medicare services that create barriers to employment. We can help you understand how work impacts the waivers that you may be receiving, such as Star Plus and home care services. We can help appeal a denial of a Medicare service, such as durable medical equipment. Let's say that you put in a request to get a new wheelchair, for example, so that you're able to, so you have a more reliable wheelchair that you can utilize while you're working, and you were denied. We can help address that. If you're receiving Medicaid, but it's been terminated and you're still receiving your Social Security benefits, we can help get that reinstated. And we advocate to expand the Medicaid buy-in program or challenge cuts to said programs within the Medicaid umbrella. We can also assist in accessing appropriate assistive technology, such as a replacement wheelchair, computer, augmentative communication devices to help perform the essential functions of your job. Although we do not pay for these for you, we can help find resources that can help you pay for them. Same with the vehicle modifications. And we can also
Yes, sorry, I'm trying to figure out who it is so I can get them. Okay, go ahead, Jonathan.
Okay. So we can also assist you with finding other means to get this technology. So for example, one of the things that you can do as somebody who's receiving a Social Security disability benefit is you can report the expenditures of said that you're spending on this equipment as an impairment related work expense, and Social Security can count up to all of that expense as something that they won't charge you for, or something that if you earned income to get said technology, I apologize, I have a stutter, then we can help you understand how to tell Social Security, hey, I spent $300 on my meds this month. Do you see the $300 I made here? Please don't count that against me because I had to spend that in order to work. We can also help assist with work-related transportation. If you're receiving, if you are trying to save money for a car, we can help you with a pass plan, which allows you to set some of your money aside that won't count against you, even if you're saving it, so that you can put that towards some big purchase that you're needing, such as a car. We can help challenge inaccessible public transportation, and in case, for example, your local transit system is changing their route to where taking transit's no longer accessible, we can help advocate against that. And if you are having issues receiving paratransit, we can help file complaints against them and challenge denials of paratransit services. And we also advocate to expand and improve public transportation services, and of course, advocate against cuts in existing public transportation services. Another thing we can do is we can assist with housing related issues that may cause a barrier to employment. So helping people retain stable housing. If there's a discrimination case against a apartment complex, for example, they're not allowing you to have a service dog that you have to take with you to work. That's something we can assist with, along with, we also advise landlords of what they have to do as somebody who serves a population who may be disabled, who may have disability, such as making sure they have accessible parking space. Again, the pet policies, if they need a live-in attendant, we can assist with that. And last but not least, here are our numbers. I'm going to read them out loud. So our toll-free number, just to make a case in general, whether that's with our department or any of the others, is 1-800-252-9108. If you are a current client, you can call 1-800-315-3876. If you need to use a video phone, you can call 1-866-362-2851, or you can also go to our online intake at intake.drtx.org. And I'll also be available after this clinic to answer any questions you may have. My email, as mentioned earlier, is the letter J, Dela Rosa, D as in dog, ELAROS as in Sam, A, drtx.org. And my phone number, the one that goes directly to me, is 214-845-4054. And that's my presentation. Do we have any questions in the chat? Hold on, let me look here. I'm gonna stop sharing now. Okay, so no questions here. Does anyone have any questions?
Jonathan, can you tell us a little bit more about what happens when a student or someone who is younger than 18 years old is getting benefits? Then at 18 years old, I think it gets reevaluated. Is that correct?
Yes. So if you are receiving benefits as someone who is a child under SSI, everyone who is 18 will have to go what's called the age 18 redetermination. And essentially what that means is do you still have, is your disability causing you to be unable to work? Or if you are going to keep it for, if it is causing you to be unable to work, or is it you're going to keep it for either over a year, or is it a condition that will result in your death? If you're medically eligible for SSI still, then you will continue to receive SSI. It'll just be under your record. And if not, then you will be terminated from that. I'm actually going to post a link to Social Security's flyer about what happens when you turn 18 so that you have it. I just put that in the chat. But yeah, they've got a whole little pamphlet that discusses what happens.
Thank you, Jonathan.
I had a question about if you're on survivor Social Security benefits and you're fall on the autism spectrum. So at 18, like currently we're not declared disabled. You know, we have a diagnosis, we have the special programs in the school, but at 18, would I have to try to get my son declared disabled to continue benefits, or is there any program that helps us in that?
Gotcha. So your child, do they receive, you said survivor's benefits. So are they're considered a disabled child? Is that correct?
Well, they're receiving survivor benefits because their father's deceased.
Gotcha.
But he is also a disabled child. You know, we have all the proper diagnoses in school. He's in the special ed programs at school and receives support services from a psychiatrist and, you know, all those things. So I just wondered at 18, the checks would stop, but that would be helpful to keep him going into college and all that.
Right. So if they're getting survivor benefits and they do have a disability, they can still receive those benefits as a disabled adult child. So they would still be able to, you know, provided that they do have a diagnosis, that they are considered disabled. You will need to provide that information to Social Security, but they can still keep those survivor benefits as someone who is a disabled adult child.
So I would essentially apply for disability, or I'll look on your website. I don't want to take up everyone's time on this individual thing, but
yeah, no, you're quite fine. But yes, I would reach out to your Social Security. Pro tip, do not call. If you can avoid it, try to avoid calling the 1-800 number for your security office. You will be on hold for 2 hours and it might disconnect, and that does not lead to a good time.
just quickly, a timeline. I mean, he won't be 18 until the end of next April 2022. Would I start that now, or would I start it 90 days out, or any suggestion on a timeline for approaching them to make sure that transition is smooth?
I would go ahead and start now.
Okay.
You are it's a year beforehand. Go ahead and reach out, at least to speak with somebody there to help make sure that you're on the right track. And if they do need anything, then you have the time to do it. Thank
you.
So I would go ahead and start that. But yes, they can receive benefits and the same survivor benefits that they're getting. They would just receive it as a disabled.
Thank you very much.
In regards to keeping those benefits, the only special condition that is different from people who are receiving SSDI is that if they were to get married, then they would generally lose that benefit.
Okay.
Anybody else have any other questions? Again, feel free to unmute or type it on the chat.
Jonathan, you said that if they get married, that they would be disqualified for SSDI?
So not regular SSDI. If they're receiving it on their record, they wouldn't be. Under SSDI, the only thing that Social Security cares about, generally speaking, is the work that you're doing. So, but under the disabled adult child benefit, if they were receiving SSDI that way, then yes, if they were to get married, they would generally lose that benefit. And the same goes for people who receive SSI. Generally speaking, they would lose that benefit as well, because some of the income that the spouse would earn would be deemed to the recipient.
Okay, so it's just based on the income qualification, not the fact that they can get married and have a relationship, right?
Well, for this childhood disability benefit, if they're a disabled adult child, if they're receiving SSDI under that program, my understanding is that if they're married, then that's that.
Okay, what about an adult who is receiving disability from Social Security? If they get married, will that affect them too?
So if they're receiving SSI, yes, that generally does affect people. And if they're receiving benefits under a disabled adult child, then it would be. But if you're just receiving SSDI as someone who has worked and you're receiving it under your record, then it would not affect your ability to be married.
Okay,
Likewise, if the adult child marries someone who's another disabled adult child, then they can still keep their benefit.
okay. So so it's just based on the income then?
So only for SSI, but the income limits be strict or pretty small. But under SSDI, the program that, again, if someone's earning it just based off of their own work record, they've worked long enough and are therefore getting the benefits on their own record, as opposed to, you know, a parent's record, then they can get married with no issue.
Okay, thank you.
Jonathan, we do have a couple of questions on the chat. So the first one is, can you explain the different programs and the differences like SSI or SSDI?
Sure. So SSI, generally speaking, that's to pay. So SSI exists to pay for two things: food and shelter. You can spend it on whatever you'd like, but that's what SSI is allotted for. And these are for people who have not really worked in their lifetimes, or have worked little, or ever not very much, so they don't get SSDI. And yeah, so people who are on SSI, generally speaking, they receive, let me pull up the SSDI max for this year. There's a very good way to tell who receives what. They can receive a maximum of $794 from Social Security. So anywhere at that number, you can tell that you've got SSI. And if you get more than that, then either you get both SSI and SSDI, or SSDI by itself, depending on if you get one or two checks. But so yeah, SSI for people who haven't really worked, it's to pay for food and shelter, and SSDI is for people who have worked for a significant amount of time. It depends on your age and how long you worked, but generally it's 10 years of work, 40 credits, where you can get SSDI if you get disabled. Again, if you're a younger person and you've worked a little bit, you might be able to get SSDI under that. But SSDI is generally for people who've worked. A good way to tell if someone has SSDI is if they're getting Medicare, or if they will get Medicare in a year or two. So a good way to tell if you have SSDI is if you make more than that $794. And both programs have their own work requirements, and that can be pretty overwhelming for somebody. So if you're interested in learning more about that, definitely give me a call and I can provide you a basic interview or basic overview, depending on what your benefit is. So the other question I see is, can you define a disabled adult child? So a disabled adult child is somebody who is receiving, they have a disability that they acquired prior to the age of 22, and they're receiving benefits off of a parent's work record. So they're receiving the survivor benefits that were discussed. So that would be the disabled adult child. They call it now childhood disability benefit, but yeah, that's what a disabled adult child is. It's not somebody who's receiving benefits before or after 18. It's a specific designation by Social Security for people who have a disability prior to the age of 22 and who are receiving benefits from under the parent's work record. And in regards to how many hours you can work without SSI lowering your benefit and how much you can make as well, that is definitely a question where you need to call me on, because that depends on how much you're earning every hour, and that depends on a lot of other things that are exclusive to you. So send me an email. I'm going to type it in the chat, but it's the letter J, De La Rosa, D as in dog, ELAROS as in Sam A, at drtx.org.
Any other questions? We just have a few more minutes. Answer questions.
Well, I'll be here once the clinic is over. And if you need anything, again, I've put my email in the chat. Feel free to send me an email and I'll be able to help you.
Well, I think that concludes pretty much our presentations today. If anybody has any questions, feel free to email us. We will be sharing all of our presentations by email, so be on the lookout for that. You'll probably get it Monday. And I think that's pretty much it. Last chance for questions. All right. Thank you, everyone.